All right, good morning, guys. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you guys had a great holiday break. I would just want to start off this week by talking a little bit about the last 3 weeks we have of, that until the end of mid-year. We don't have that much left to go. This is our last week of new information. So we're going to be talking about Gregor Mendel and inheritance and different things like that. Next week, we have our Unit 3 test, which will cover the information that we've had for the 2 weeks before break, and then this week of information, and then our final exam. I want to stress this and say this to all of you. Your final exam, I would really appreciate it if you guys attended either the Tuesday or the Thursday 9 a.m. session on the week of final exams. If you attend that, you guys will get to take this test as a group. So whoever shows up for the 9 a.m. session on Tuesday will get to take it together. Whoever shows up for the 9 a.m. session on Thursday will get to take their final exam with those students as well. So this is a really big and important thing that'll be very helpful for you guys to make sure that you get the best grade possible in this course and also on your final exam. So this week, the information that'll be due, you'll have the genetics and Punnett squared Google Doc that needs to be turned in. You have the genetics and mutations quiz. And then lastly, you have the genetics discussion that will need to be turned in. Again, next week we will have our quiz. We'll have our unit test, I'm sorry. So the information, so next week's unit test, those two classes in the morning will be dedicated to any questions that you may have on your unit test. Please feel free to stop in and ask me any questions you might have in your unit test. Feel free to bring your unit test to those sessions and, work on it, sit there and work on it and, ask me a question as you're going through it. My goal here is to be the most supportive I can to all of you. And the only way I can do that is if you show up and are present in these meetings that I have for you. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to get started talking about Mendel and some genetics. All right, so Mendel and genetics, the first thing we're learning about is inheritance. And so this is the process in which genetic material is passed from parents to their offspring, or from parents to their children, or however you want to say it. Your mom and your dad have different genetic information, and then when, they combine together to make you, then they passed on a little bit of your mom's information, a little bit of your dad's information, and that turned into the child that you are today. Okay, so first person to kind of discover this and figure out how this works was Gregor Mendel. A couple of things we want to know about him. He was living as a monk. He worked very much in the garden. He was carefully breeding pea plants and observed the results. So he observed true breeding, which was self-pollination, and then hybridization, where you had two parent plants, and they combined together to create their first child plant, and then you have those child plants and what they created after that, that's F1, and then those child plants and what they created, that's F2. So it's, same as your great-grandparents had your grandmother, your grandfather, and then your grandmother and your grandfather then had your parent, one of your parents, and then your parents had you, those different generations. This is the same thing happens in plants as well. So Gregor Mendel took a look at different seed shapes, see if they were spherical or dented. He checked out the color of the seeds and also the color of the flower that they created. He used mathematical experiments. He kept careful records and numbers. And he just wanted to see what they would create based on the traits that he was looking at. One of the big parts of this is law of segregation. So there's alternate versions of genes account for variations of inherited traits. Organisms that inherit two alleles for a trait, so like one from each parent sometimes, those will be hybrids. So if you get like a big T from your mom and a little t from your dad, that's called a hybrid. Or you can get identical alleles where, like, say you get both a little t and a little t from your mom and your dad. Those are identical. That's true breeding. The alleles are different, then the dominant allele is expressed. So the dominant allele we will represent this way is with a capital letter, and the recessive is what we'll represent with a lowercase letter. If the two alleles for each characteristics are segregated during gamete production, then that is called the law of segregation. So monohybrid cross. This is a cross between two parents that are identical in all but one character. Example is a short pea plant crossed with a tall pea plant. So for the first parent generation is P, then again F1, F2, we talked about that, that's grandparents. So in your F1 cross, so your first parent generation, your F1 cross, they'll all be tall. And then in your F2 cross, you'll have 3 of them tall and 1 of them short. As you see, you start off with a short parent and a tall parent. The tall parent is going to represent that they're, all in big T, and the short parent is going to represent that they're, the short parent is going to represent that they're all in little t. So everything down here is going to be big T, little t. And then when they're crossed again, this is what you get. Okay. With modern genetics, you also have alleles. So they form alternate or the same gene. Each trait has 2 alleles. The dominant recessive, again, the dominant allele is going to mask the effect of the recessive. So say that brown hair color is dominant over blonde. We'll represent the dominant color with T, the big T, the capital T, and then the blonde hair color with recessive T, little t. So to get a blonde hair color, you would need 2 little t's. It's not that simple when it comes to hair color. It's not that simple when it comes to eye color, all of those sort of things. But this is, the basics of genetics that we're talking about here. Okay, so right here you see there's the allele for purple flowers, and then you have an allele for all white flowers. And when they combine, depending on how they're represented, you might get all purple or all white, or a mix of the two. Okay, so the gene locus, the place on the homologous pair of chromosomes where the alleles occur. There's 1 on each chromosome. Okay, so one's given from your mom, one's given from your dad, and that gene is located on the same spot on each of their genes. And then that's when they combine, they give you those new genes. Okay, so a homozygous or true breeding, both the copies of the allele are identical. So you either get 2 capital letters or 2 lowercase letters. So in this case, we're using T. Heterozygous is when you get a unique, or each copy, 1 of each. So say your mom gives you a big T and your dad gives you a little t, then you get a heterozygous pair. Okay, so the genotype is going to be those letters that we keep talking about. So it's the alleles and what they represent. So it's the big T, which is going to be a homozygous dominant. A little t is also homozygous, but it is recessive. And then the big T, little t is going to be heterozygous. Phenotype, on the other hand, is going to refer to what is actually shown outside to the world. So again, let's go back to the hair color. So say that brown hair is dominant, then I could either be represented by that in a big T, homozygous dominant, or big T, little t, heterozygous, but it's still dominant because the big T will mask the little t no matter what. Okay, so this is going to, the phenotype that you will see with those is the brown hair. If you had a little t, then you would see blonde hair. Okay, so the phenotype is what you actually see on the person, on the animal, and the genotype is the genes that are represented behind the scenes that you can't actually see. Okay, so down here again, genotype